Hi everyone, I'm Alex Gosse, owner of Magically Resin, and working in collaboration with Craft Resin to bring you new ideas and ways to use craft resin that maybe you hadn't thought of, or to empower you to just try something that you've been wanting to try. I make these really fun dichroic inlays that are meant to be used with resin, and they're not the same as what you would find when people are using stained glass. They're a flexible plastic dichroic with texture, and I just think these are so fun. So I designed these to make it easier for somebody with very limited number of items to make something really spectacular that your friends and family would ooh and ah over. And I know that this is one of those things. By simply starting with the very best resin, craft resin, which I can say as an expert, I have used a lot of resin in the 7 years that I've been doing this, and it is the best. But if you start out with a really good resin, and then you have a little bit of glitter or a little bit of alcohol ink and a mold and something else to put in it, you can make something really extraordinary. And that did not take up a lot of space or cost a lot of money to have those things on hand. So what I'm doing here is I make my own alcohol ink mix, but you could easily just use Pinata Gold. And what I want to do is there's a recessed edge, and I want that edge to be very gold. On the chance that the inlay, that you didn't cut it perfectly, the inlay is actually larger than this piece, but I'd already cut it to size. And I could do a tutorial on cutting my inlays if that's something you're interested in. So please be sure and mention anything you might like to see in the comments. So this is just my own version of gold alcohol ink, and I wanted the edge to be gold. And now I'm turning around the mold to make sure that all of it gets covered. And then I'm just drying it up with a little bit of heat gun. But be careful with the heat gun with your silicone. You want to make sure not burn your silicone. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a show with the inlay and see how neat it looks with light shining through. So once I'm sure that my alcohol ink is completely dry, because you do not want the alcohol ink to come up into your resin, I'm pouring in my resin that I had already mixed equal parts A and B by volume, and I let it sit and warm up for a while too. I wanted to make sure there were no bubbles in this. I'm also going to hit this with a heat gun and a little bit of alcohol spray before I attempt putting in the inlay to minimize any chance of bubbles, because this inlay could trap bubbles. If you're interested in more tutorials about how to mix your craft resin, how to measure your craft resin, temperature for craft resin, you can find many tutorials on the Craft Resin YouTube, and you can find a lot of information from the Craft Resin website. And all of those resources can help you get the answers that you need to make sure that you're using your product correctly and to get the best outcome from it. Because this mold has a recessed space, I can see that there are some bubbles on the bottom, and it has nothing to do with, there weren't any bubbles in the resin when I poured it, but because of the shape of this mold, and you'll have this with any kind of silicone mold that has basically an inlay space, it's just really known for trapping bubbles. So I've taken a silicone pointer, because it's important not to scratch your mold. So I didn't want to use anything like, some people use a toothpick. I think that's dangerous to scratch the mold. So I really like just using my silicone pointer. If you're careful, you can use a toothpick. So now what I'm doing is I like to bend the inlay, because this is a rather rigid inlay designed on purpose to be rigid, because that works better with resin. And I'm bending it just a little bit where part of the inlay goes in until I can see for sure that there's no air being trapped underneath it. And then I push down the other half because you can see through the inlay, you can tell that there aren't bubbles. It's harder to tell here, but when you're doing it, you can see it. So once I'm sure that all the air is released, I push down the other side, and then I cover all of it with resin to give it another look to make sure there aren't any air bubbles. And if there are, you can press it down like I'm doing here to make sure and release any air bubbles that you see. Because I'm using craft resin and because I let it get so warm and degas before I poured it, there was really no chance of there having a lot of trouble with bubbles. And that is the joy of craft resin. Seriously, what a wonderful tool to get to use. I feel so lucky. What I'm doing here is I used another alcohol, I call it mica, when I take just mica that I get and I mix alcohol in it, because it's easy to add in just a hint of color and you don't have to worry about the mica getting goopy like it does sometimes. So I like adding it to a little bit of alcohol in a bottle and then adding it that way, so you can add in just ever so slightly. And I'll have everything I used in the description below. So what I'm doing now is I added just a little bit of cellophane glitter. I call it snow. I'm not actually sure if it's cellophane glitter, but it feels like that. It's very, very light, and it's different than your average glitter. And that too will be linked below. So now I'm going to make what I've done in a ton of my videos because I love this process so much. I am going to make a marbleized version of Pinata White Alcohol ink, Pinata Silver Alcohol ink, and a couple drops of silicone oil added to clear craft resin that was very warm. And see how beautiful those striations are? This is such a neat effect, and I love the silver and the white together make the most subtle marble, and it's just gorgeous. And I wanted to make sure and make this piece opaque because the dichroic is translucent. So I wanted to put a backing on it so that the color would come through and that the dichroic really, really shine. Look at how gorgeous that marble effect did. Isn't that so pretty? So I realized now I had plenty of extra resin, and I really love this effect for my wine stoppers. So I make all kinds of wine stoppers with the marble spin technique. And if you're interested in a tutorial for my wine stoppers, let me know and I'll throw one of those in on my YouTube channel. I do these a bunch of different ways, and a lot of times I just do it with extra mold when I'm pouring something else, extra resin. But I love this type of marble. When it's already ready to go, it makes the most gorgeous wine stoppers. And frequently I have colored rocks or crystals or a wide variety of things I put in the wine stoppers. And I just think that that makes such a fun wine stopper. So I have about, I don't know, like 100 of those, and I have a bunch of them up for sale in my shop because they're just so fun to make, and they're great for just a little bit of extra resin. I also really like using the wine stoppers, whatever people call them, as little pouring cups. So if I'm doing something where I only want just a little bit of a pop of color, I'll mix it up in the wine topper, and then when it cures, it'll cure basically what will be the top of the wine topper when I demold it, which I think is just beautiful. So if you got like a little hint of gold or something, using a tiny mold that you have is a very good way to make sure that all of your resin gets used and you don't have to clean a cup. Today I was less concerned about the marble technique, and what I really wanted was for it to be light and cloudy, like feel like clouds, but I also wanted full coverage, so it was most important to me that it get dispersed well, and much less important that it stay in the formation it was, because I knew that I was going to let it cure up a little bit and do exactly what I'm doing now. So this has set for probably 30 minutes, and the resin has cured up quite a bit, and it was 110 before I started, so it was pretty warm before I even got started. And I just wanted this to be a very subtle cloud feeling. If I'd wanted this to keep the lines more rigid, I could have waited until later on and let it set up more, and then it would have held this, what you see right there. But it didn't. It was very soft because this was still really pretty soft resin. It wasn't even to the honey stage yet. But I wanted it to have the feel of movement without this really pretty design, but I knew that that design would disperse. So you can see the snow around the edges, and I think that's so fun. And the reason it is as reflective as it is because it has the white backing. If I had left it clear, which you totally could have, and it would be gorgeous, it would be very rainbow, but not very reflective. I have a bunch of these inlays in my Etsy shop, and I would be happy to make more tutorials about anything y'all are interested in. So please leave a message in the comments and like and subscribe. It helps us know what you're interested in. And also, Craft Resin loves their artists. So if you make something that was inspired by any of their videos, please reach out to us on Instagram and tag us in any of your posts. Also, I'm magically resin everywhere, and I would just love to see what you're doing. Have a fantastic day, everybody.